We're uploading to YouTube, so hold on just a minute. Okay. We are now live on YouTube as well. Thanks.
All right, I will go ahead and call to order the Oxford City Council meeting. It was August 4th, 2020. Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bracken,
Here.
Mr. Ellerby,
Here.
Mr. Prithridge,
Here.
Mr. Snavely,
I'm here.
Ms. Southard,
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here. All right. May I have a motion on the agenda, please?
I move.
I would first like to move that we amend the agenda by adding an agenda item, COVID-19 discussion, and you can determine where best it goes. So that's my motion.
Second.
All right.
I never said here, but I'm here, Marianne.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the agenda amended to add a discussion on COVID-19, probably near the end? Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll on the amended agenda?
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. Now I believe we need a motion to approve the overall agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second, moved by Ms. Southard, second by Mr. Prithridge. Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll again to approve the agenda?
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby, Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. We will move into public participation and go to public comments. For anyone wishing to address council about items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda, we would like you to state your name and your address for the record. Ms. Green, do we have anybody wishing to address council?
We have quite the crowd this evening and quite a few raised hands. So I believe, if it's okay with you, did you want to begin with the Black Lives Matters and then the League of Women Voters and
Yes.
then go to other?
Yes.
correct?
Okay.
Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So Mr. Humphrey, I'm going to unmute you at this point.
Hi,
Okay.
can everyone hear me?
We can.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Humphrey, and I live at 609 Ogden Court. I'm speaking today on behalf of and as member of Black Lives Matter Oxford, Ohio, an organization with over 150 members, including nearly 30 leading members. I'm happy to report that both of these numbers are growing. So prior to this meeting, BLM Oxford delivered to Oxford City Council a letter outlining a number of proposals that we believe will promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in Oxford. So for the benefit of everyone listening tonight, I'd like to read this letter in its entirety. Dear members of the Oxford City Council, after the murder of George Floyd by Officer Derek Chauvin, and in light of the many killings of African Americans by officers, a joint message was presented by Mayor Mike Smith, Miami University President Greg Crawford, and NAAC President Fran Jackson, denouncing hate and racism. This message spoke of the need for transformative change and called on the community to come together and focus on our core values which define us. Values centered on creating a just society for all, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Chief Jones echoed these sentiments in his accompanying message, calling what happened to George Floyd indefensible, unjust, and inexcusable. Chief Jones's statement also upheld values of diversity, inclusion, and transparency, and concluded with the hope that this tragedy might open lines of communication so that the Oxford community can come to a closer understanding of each other. We wish to echo Chief Jones's words and to thank our community leaders for their response to these tragedies and to the ongoing struggle against systemic racism in our institutions. We, the members of Black Lives Matter Oxford, also feel that equity, inclusion, transparency, and open communication are key values that promote and preserve all that is beautiful in Oxford, Ohio. And we believe it is the duty of every Oxford citizen to uphold these values as well. Still, questions remain to be answered. How will Oxford not only say it supports equity, diversity, inclusion, and transparency, but also show it in action? How do we as a community make sure that racial discrimination isn't happening in Oxford? How do we make sure that it doesn't happen in the future? How do we ensure that all Oxford citizens feel able to express themselves freely through clear lines of communication and without fear of reprisal? And how will Oxford show that it stands in solidarity with other towns and cities in supporting the right of the people to decide how the police who serve them function in their communities? This letter, written by Oxford residents and members of Black Lives Matter Oxford, Ohio, and endorsed by several area organizations, lays out potential police reforms to police policy in Oxford that are crucial for addressing our concerns and upholding the values laid out above. We've offered rationales for each proposal and have included precedent cases where cities have instituted similar reforms. Our guiding principle is that Oxford is and remains a safe place for the entire community, and that community is the first priority of elected officials and taxpayer-funded employees alike. We ask that the City Council consider each of these proposals on its own merit rather than together as a single proposal. Each one is valuable in its own right, and each one addresses unique concerns around policing. We also ask that these proposals be evaluated by the PCRRC and that their conclusions be presented to City Council at the first council meeting following PCRRC's review, during which time this topic can be discussed in greater depth. So, the policies. Policy 1, require comprehensive reporting. Require police officers to establish, record, and report objective justification for all stops, including pedestrian stops. These reports should include the reason for the stop, location of the stop, demographic information such as race, gender, and approximate age of persons stopped, and should specify the use of force, if any. PCRRC should be granted access to this data and should provide anonymous aggregated information as well as conclusions to the public on a quarterly basis. Our rationale. This policy promotes transparency, which is necessary to identify and remedy biases in policing. Public access to aggregate data fosters trust between the Oxford community and the police department. And further, a public record of unbiased policing would serve as a key marker that Oxford is truly an inclusive community. The qualitative benefits of this policy far outweigh any time costs of reporting. A simple print or digital form with appropriate prompts and response options could be filled out in under a minute. Our second policy, remove barriers to reporting police misconduct. For all stops, require police officers to give civilians their name, badge number, reason for the stop, and a card with instructions for filing a complaint with the PCRRC. Our rationale is that this policy promotes transparency and open communication in policing. Police officers already carry business cards and commonly explain their reasons for stops, so this change would not be disruptive to any current policing practices. Personalized business cards and instructional cards are relatively inexpensive, and similar cards are already used by other departments. Third, a resolution to research and fund alternatives to traditional policing. So this one's a little bit longer. At the July 7th, 2020 City Council meeting, Chief Jones outlined OPD's values as well as the training police officers undertake in order to fully live out those values. The themes of continued education in crisis intervention, de-escalation, and mental health came up repeatedly in relation to the training, outreach, and ongoing work of the department. It became clear that the department is doing its best, but that balancing continuing education with everyday functioning of a police department has proved difficult. Chief Jones stated that the department wished to better serve persons with disabilities, that they had tried to incorporate addiction and implicit bias training, and that crisis intervention training was encouraged. And such phrasing reflects two truths in policing. OPD does its best to live up to its values, yet there's simply not enough time to ensure that officers are experts in mental health, addiction, disabilities, homelessness, de-escalation, and crisis intervention. There's simply not enough time to ensure that officers are experts in mental health, addiction, disabilities, and crisis intervention, all on top of their primary duties. This practice is unfair to both officers and the community they serve. And if Oxford truly values expertise in mental health, addictions, disabilities, homelessness, de-escalation, and crisis intervention, we propose that the City Council resolve to begin actively seeking out, researching, and funding public servant roles that address those needs directly. There are a number of ways that this might work. One option would be a program modeled after Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, which fills this gap without placing additional burdens of training, time, and cost on the department. So for over 30 years, the Cahoots program has served as a popular model for rethinking the role of police in public safety. Cahoots relieves some of the crisis response duties of the police through the help of unarmed first responders trained in mental health, de-escalation, and harm reduction. The success of this model is evidenced by its adoption in larger cities like Oakland, California, Denver, Colorado, and Dallas, Texas, and in smaller cities like Salinas, California, where similar crisis management teams act as responders to public safety crises that do not require armed intervention. Cahoots offers a broad range of emergency services that have previously fallen to police officers to handle, including crisis counseling, suicide prevention, assessment and intervention, conflict resolution and mediation, substance abuse and housing counseling, first aid and non-emergency medical care, resource connection and referrals, and transportation to services. Not only are these issues that police are often forced to handle, but they're public health and welfare issues that the Oxford community currently faces. Instead, Cahoots allows officers to focus on matters requiring specific police intervention by reducing the need for officers with guns to respond to crises that don't require force. This program reduces costs and decreases the likelihood that a person in crisis will be harmed or arrested. A recent report found that with just over 2% of the Eugene and Springfield, Oregon Police Department's annual budgets, Cahoots teams answered 17% of the department's overall call volume. This has saved the city on average $8.5 million each year. In the July 7th City Council meeting, Chief Jones proposed the hiring of a hybrid police officer and social worker who would have to go through extensive training in both fields and play dual roles. One benefit of the police social worker, according to Chief Jones, is that this person would intervene without the stigma of a police uniform. However, if this person still works for the police department and acts as a police officer, that stigma will still be present, uniform or no uniform, especially in a small community like Oxford. Moreover, a dual position means that the police social worker must juggle multiple roles that may be at odds with one another, thus lessening the officer's effectiveness. The Cahoots program would provide Oxford with experts whose entire focus is in crisis intervention, mental health, and de-escalation, freeing officers to continue the work for which they are trained, enhancing Oxford's ability to address the public health and welfare needs of its community. There are several ways that a program similar to Cahoots could be funded, whether through reallocating existing funds, committing to a hiring cap that ensures when police officers retire, they're not replaced with more officers until a certain quota of alternative public servants is met, working with state and county level resources, or by other measures determined through the research phase of this work. Regardless of how these alternatives are funded, we ask City Council to recognize the necessity of said alternatives and to work actively to see them instituted in our community. Ultimately, these alternatives will reduce the time, training, and monetary burden on the department that comes from asking officers to perform roles beyond their most important duty of protecting Oxford. It will also serve as a clear declaration that Oxford is committed to upholding, in word and in deed, the values of equity, inclusion, transparency, and open communication. We appreciate the thoughtful consideration of these proposals, which we believe are realistic, enhance the relationship between officers and community members, benefit our most marginalized citizens, and avoid unduly burdening our officers. We hold that these proposals will allow the police and community to form a stronger alliance and to uphold the values we all hold dear. Signed, Black Lives Matter, Oxford, Ohio. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Humphreys, for your well thought out letter. We will refer that to the PCRRC, and we appreciate it. All right.
All right.
Nope, go ahead. I was going to ask.
Next, I'm going to call on Ms. Fisher. Ms. Fisher, I'm going to unmute you now. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for having me. This is Jenny Fisher, 3 Quail Ridge Drive, and I am the co-president of organization of the League of Women Voters of Oxford. And our board prepared a statement to be read tonight. For full transparency, we knew that Black Lives Matter was going to be here, and we worked in collaboration with them. Our local league agrees with a statement made by the League of Women Voters of the United States on June 10th. For far too long, Black people and communities have been subjected to unimaginable abuse at the hands of law enforcement. The issues with policing are not simply the result of a few bad apples. It is the result of systems and policies born from the legacy of racial discrimination and oppression, where Black people and people of color are treated as dangerous enemy combatants rather than human beings with equal rights under our Constitution. This problem cannot be trained away. Therefore, our local league honors the request by the Black Lives Matter of Oxford that the Commission and the City Council consider proposals to further our community's effort to make sure that Oxford is and remains a safe place for all of its citizens. The request provided by Black Lives Matter recognizes that Oxford's elected officials, Miami University's administration, and community organizations have denounced hate and racism and have jointly proclaimed the need for transformative change and have called on the community to come together and focus on the core values which define us. The request also acknowledges that the Chief of Police understands that our community values of equality, inclusion, transparency, and open communication are goals to be achieved. With collaboration, we believe that our community is capable of acknowledging systems and side effects of oppression, and that together we can take concrete steps to fix them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next I will call on Ms. Rosenberg. Ms. Rosenberg, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Shauna Rosenberg and I live at 1036 Arrowhead Drive. I'm here to speak in support of Black Lives Matter Oxford's proposed initiatives. I volunteered as one of the founding members of Oxford's Police Review and Community Relations Commission in 2016 because of my support of the Black Lives Matter movement. It is my belief that if we make policing work for Black lives and the lives of other diverse populations, we will make policing work better for all of us. I myself am a member of a group at risk of police overreach and brutality, and I know that I will feel safer when common sense police reform is enacted. Each of Black Lives Matter Oxford's proposed initiatives just makes good sense. While gathering data and traffic stops and arrests is an important step to understanding what policing looks like to Black and other people of color in our community, many encounters between police and community members occur outside of traffic stops and arrests. We are a community with many diverse college students that interact with police uptown and other locations off campus. We can't get a good sense of what is really going on without stop data on pedestrian and other interactions. I know that back in 2016, the Police Commission asked that this data be provided, and apparently is still something lacking today in 2020. The second initiative, providing information via a business card to those involved in stops on how to present complaints to the Police Review Commission, seems rather easy to implement. Even though there isn't an official mechanism in place to contact the commission about complaints, this is something being worked on. At the very least, a QR code or URL that can go to the page with information about the commission and email addresses of the commission's members can be provided. The third proposed initiative to research and fund alternatives to traditional policing, such as the Cahoots model and models in other communities that reallocate funds earmarked for police to social services, may sound like we are asking for too big a change for our community to implement. But I believe with all of my heart that the Oxford community is up to the challenge presented here. Our police officers are currently being asked to deal with mental health crises, addiction issues, and other problems that could be better addressed to social workers and mental health providers. And often the response to issues like baby fawns, accidental lockouts, and missing dogs is to send an officer with a gun. As Councilor Ragu stated so eloquently a few weeks ago during a police commission forum, why does an officer with a gun need to respond about getting locked out of a car? We can certainly research as a community other ways to allocate funds currently in the police department budget to address our needs without sending an officer with a gun. The next step, actually reallocating those funds, may take courage and the willingness to make big changes. But I believe that this is something the Oxford community can accomplish. I volunteer my time and energy to this cause. I know that if we make policing work for Black lives, we make policing work better for everyone. Thank you for your time tonight.
All right, thank you for coming.
Okay, next I will call on Miss Dana. Miss Dana, I'm going to unmute you.
I still see the mute symbol on Miss Dana's box. Is that something she needs to do?
I think so. How's that?
There, we can hear you now.
Okay. I'm circling back to say my few words before Jenny Fisher got up, but she presented what the league put together adequately to you. It is my pleasure to introduce Jenny Fisher as one of the co-presidents of the League of Women Voters of Oxford to City Council. Jenny is one of the 3 co-presidents, and she's in charge of administration and the details that entails for our organization. We are very happy to have Jenny as a part of our organization and on board, and you will hear a lot from her as we work together on our programming and our voter service. So I'm pleased that she was able to come tonight to speak to all of you, and now you know who she is going forward. So thank you very much for your difficult discussions and presentations to the council.
All right. Thank you, Miss Dana.
Thank you. Next, I will call on Mr. Chandler. Mr. Chandler, there you go.
Hi, I'm Justin Chandler. I live at 106.5 West Chestnut. I'm a member of the Black Lives Matter Oxford, Ohio group and helped in the writing of this letter, which was co-written by Oxford community members and presented to multiple community organizations for suggestions and endorsements before being presented to City Council. And tonight I'm reading a letter on behalf of the Butler County Progressive PAC, endorsing our letter and the policy proposals that we suggest. To the members of Oxford City Council, the officers and executive board of the Butler County Progressive Political Action Committee, BCP PAC, support Black Lives Matter Oxford's July 31st letter to Oxford City Council proposing policing changes in the city. The BCP PAC founding principles state, in part, that we believe that individuals have a fundamental right to live in a world of social, political, environmental, and economic justice, and that we believe that it is necessary to address the root causes of the problems we face. BLMO's proposals to require comprehensive officer reporting, remove barriers to reporting police misconduct, and research and fund alternatives to traditional policing are in alignment with those principles. They build on the existing values and good intentions already evident in the Oxford Police Department and City Council. As the authors of the letter write, they will also serve as a clear declaration that Oxford is committed to upholding in word and in deed the values of equity, inclusion, transparency, and open communication. They lay out clear rationales for each proposal, as well as roadmaps for how to achieve them. We believe these proposed policies are desirable and achievable, and we urge the City of Oxford to adopt them. Once implemented, they can serve as a model for other cities in Butler County, throughout the state of Ohio, and across the country. BCP PAC commends Black Lives Matter Oxford for their leadership and for their optimism that Oxford can live up to its full potential as a truly inclusive community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I will call on Ms. Blackmer. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, sorry about that. My name's Geneva Blackmer. I live at 2315 Glen Court. I'm speaking on behalf of the Interfaith Center at 16 South Campus Avenue. And I would like to read a letter of endorsement on behalf of the Interfaith Center at Miami. Please accept this letter of endorsement on behalf of the Interfaith Center at Miami University, offering our full support of the police policy reforms proposed by Black Lives Matter Oxford. The Interfaith Center encourages the Oxford City Council to adopt the following reform policies. 1, require comprehensive reporting. 2, remove barriers to reporting police misconduct. And 3, resolution to research and fund alternatives to traditional policing. At the Interfaith Center, we actively seek to deconstruct implicit bias, racism, and xenophobia, which creates barriers and divisions within our community. It is impossible for us to cultivate a safe space for people of all diverse religious, spiritual, and secular worldviews, or to actualize our vision of a welcoming, just, and equitable society if systems within our own community do not embody this vision. The Interfaith Center encourages the Oxford City Council to adopt the appropriate reforms necessary to eradicate bias and racism from our institutions, policies, and organizational structures, beginning with the current police policy reforms presented by Black Lives Matter Oxford. If you have any questions, please contact us. And I've sent this letter, and I'm the program director of the Interfaith Center.
All right. Thank you very much.
And I see one more hand raised, and then I have one submitted written comment. Ms. Newsome, go ahead.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, my name is Nicole Newsome. I live at 3770 South Point Parkway in apartment 624. I am one of the co-leaders of BLM Oxford and am in full support of the list of recommendations that Brandon has read to you tonight. I think that Oxford has the utmost potential to set an example for other small towns across the United States and really implementing revolutionary change and creating a creating a an intentional relationship between the police and the community members through these list of recommendations. So I really, really hope that you will take these into consideration and that we can work towards an even better and more inclusive Oxford. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else want to raise their hand at this point? And then I do have one submitted written comment that I'll share. This was received today from Michael and Teresa Beck at 1348 Dana Drive. And they state, we read and understand that the city is planning to enforce the ordinances concerning noise and litter at student parties. We also hope that the city plans to control any large crowds at student parties. The citizens of Oxford look to the city to protect the whole community. Thank you.
All right. All right. If there are no more public comments, we can move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Snavely, second
Seconded.
by Ms. Southard. Any items to be removed tonight? Seeing none, Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll to approve the consent agenda?
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken, Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
With thanks to Marianne, yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, we will move on to resolutions. Ms. Eaton, you may read the first resolution when you are ready.
A resolution of council accepting the recommendation of the Housing Advisory Commission and authorizing the transfer of approximately $5,825 from the Housing Trust Fund to the Family Resource Center to assist individuals and families with housing needs.
Motion to adopt.
Move adoption.
Adoption by Mr. Snavely, second by Mr. Ellerby. Who from staff wanted to,
Mr. Perry.
Perry? Oh, there we are. Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Good evening, everyone. This is a request that we discussed both at a previous council meeting several months ago and at the recent work section briefly. This is a fund that's been around for a long time, that not a whole lot of activity has happened with it. There's about $5,000 left in it. It started out as around $10,000, and some of that did go to assist in the purchase of a home in the Mile Square in the past. And so based on recent discussions and everything that's happened with COVID and with what will probably be some upcoming difficulties for housing for quite a few people in town, the Family Resource Center seems to be the best candidate to utilize that money in the most efficient and effective way. So the recommendation from our Housing Advisory Commission is to transfer the remains of that fund, keep the fund open, and then the staff would evaluate along with council how best to use that in the future so that we can identify uses for it and revenue streams. But that would zero it out for now. So I think that'd be the best thing to do. So that is a recommendation from Housing Advisory Commission as well. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council?
I don't see any hands raised.
All right. Council discussion? All right, I think we're all in agreement. Oh, I see Mr. Ellerby.
Oh, never mind. I'll call the question.
Okay. Oh, I see Mr. Bracken's hand real quick.
Sure. I just wanted to get clarification. I'm on the board of the FRC, and I just want to make sure if this is a situation in which I should recuse myself. I've heard mixed answers.
Mr. Mazur, do you mind chiming in on the membership and on the board there?
I'm sorry, the membership, I heard an acronym used. What's the acronym stand for?
The Family Resource Center, where this money would be going to.
Okay. As long as you're not deriving any personal benefits from the transfer of this money, it's my opinion legally that you do not have to recuse yourself. However, certainly if you feel uncomfortable voting on this personally, it is your prerogative to recuse yourself if you choose to do so. But legally, I do not. My opinion is that you do not have to recuse yourself.
Yeah, I certainly have no personal gain involved here whatsoever.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mazur. All right, Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu, Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, that resolution is adopted, and hopefully this won't be the first of too many of these type of transfers. Okay, we will move on to ordinances. And we have several first readings. So Ms. Eaton, will you please read the first reading whenever you're ready?
An ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance, Chapter 137, entitled Housing Advisory Commission, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance, Chapter 137, entitled Housing Advisory Commission.
All right. I will turn over to Mr. Perry.
Thank you again. In a similar vein, on the topic of housing, this topic was also discussed. This was kind of the premise for the work session, actually, that you held with the Housing Advisory Commission members. The idea here that actually went back to April from discussion at the Housing Advisory Commission was to broaden out the membership, and so that if there were members who could offer some expertise that the current commission members did not have, by increasing the membership by 2 members, that would allow that opportunity. And based on the discussion at the work session, the consensus was that if there were members that were outside of Oxford Township, that they should not be voting members. And so the way that I reworded everything, I think captures the intent there. So at least 5 members would have to be residents of Oxford, but that would allow 2 additional members to be non-voting members. And so that gives some flexibility to the commission and the council in the appointments. That was the main topic. There were several other things that were more updates as to more recent changes as far as long-range plans go. Also, the current efforts that are being made, just kind of some industry standard terminology, safe and decent housing, those kinds of things, what the purposes are. So that's all been cleaned up. A lot of discussion happened at the Housing Advisory Commission on that. So I think that captures everything, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after public comment.
All right. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this ordinance before council?
There is a raised hand. Ms. Lind, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Sherry Lind. I reside at 134 Northridge, Apartment 3. I'm the chair of the Housing Advisory Commission. First, I want to thank Mr. Perry for hours of listening to the work session tapes to make sure that everything was included. But I do want to make a statement about the work session that happened 7/21 at 6:30. City Council may recall that during the work session, the city manager spoke about the difficulty of finding citizens who wish to serve on our commissions. If we need to look outside of Oxford and Oxford Township to find a professional who fits one of the categories listed, it will be difficult to recruit them if they cannot vote. Wouldn't it be better to restrict the number of members from outside the city and township to 2 and allow them voting privileges? Thank you. And HAC will do whatever city council wants us to do.
Right. Council discussion? All right, I just again also want to thank Mr. Perry for sorting this out. Okay, I see some raised hands. Let me go to Mr. Bracken and then to Mr. Prithridge.
Yeah, I have no objection to that. I think that's a good idea. And thanks, Sherry, for that. And thanks, Sam, for all the hard work on it.
All right, Mr. Prithridge.
So yeah, I appreciate all the great work that the HAC is doing. I guess just for clarification, I mean, I think right now the HAC doesn't have that many voting. It's not like a policy-making body for which voting is as essential as, for example, the Planning Commission. So whether those folks are voting members or not, I think having served on the HAC, it's really a generative commission in terms of conversation, and typically operates based on consensus. So the proposal, even if it doesn't grant voting membership to non-residents, I think it won't impede the work of the board or the ability to recruit people there. And if it does, then I think we can revisit it. So.
Anyone else? All right, we will see this again in 2 weeks. We'll move on to our first ordinance. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
Ordinance amending ordinance number 3538, supplemental budget ordinance number 5, to make supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2020.
All right, I will turn it over to Mr. Newland.
Yes, the first item is the appropriation of the money from the Housing Trust Fund so we can write a check for Family Resource Center. And that's is $5,898.05. And actually today it went up by $4.37. So next reading will be $5,902.42. And that was just because we closed out the month and we posted interest to it today. The next one has to do with the budgeted transfer from the general fund to the Aquatic Center Debt Service Fund. And due to excess funds being available in the Aquatic Center Improvement Fund, what this proposes is rescinding the transfer from the general fund to the debt service fund for the Aquatic Center and transferring $102,819.84 to the Aquatic Center Capital Improvement Fund. And that'll make the fund whole so it can pay the debt service in November. So what this basically does for the general fund, it decreases expenditures by $308,500, which in this environment is a good thing for the general fund. So that's a plus for the general fund this year. The next one is to make an adjustment to personnel services in the general fund for an unbudgeted retirement. And that comes to $44,590. And that was in the park maintenance budget. The fourth issue is to make a budget adjustment for unbudgeted purchases for mobile electronic message boards to be used for messaging of the city's face mask ordinance to students and visitors. And I included a letter in the packet from Mr. Dreisbach that explains the rationale behind the purchase of these signs. And I think it's a good thing that we're doing it. And that money will be reimbursing the capital and equipment fund from the local coronavirus relief fund, because that's a good expense for the money for the COVID-19 funds we received. And the last item is to make a budget adjustment for an insurance reimbursement and a subsequent repair expenditure for a squad in the fire EMS fund. And originally this money was supposed to go directly to the repair shop, but they sent it to the city, so we have to run it through the city. So this is for, we received $16,766.33 on the revenue side and reimbursement from insurance company. And then on the expense side, we're increasing repairs by $16,766.33 for the repair of that vehicle. Be glad to answer any questions.
Anyone from the public like to address this ordinance before council?
I do not see any hands raised.
All right, council discussion. I see Ms. Southard's hand first.
Yeah, I think this idea of the programmable mobile message boards is a great idea, and I'm glad that we're doing that. And I was just wanting more. This is something we can use probably indefinitely. It's something we may need. So I wondered if anybody knows what the lifespan of this of these boards are, and just a little bit more about those boards. So if you know anything about them, I'd be glad to know.
I see Chief Jones's hand. Chief, you're still muted.
Sure. Yeah, I'm familiar with the boards. In fact, I've asked for them in our capital budget the last couple of years. These are, I think, I don't know for sure the lifespan, but I know that there are boards out there that we've used that have been around for 10 years. These are things that can be used for traffic control, for announcements. They actually can have built-in radar so that if you reach a certain speed, it can say slow down. So yes, I think they are very versatile. Like I said, if I could have gotten them a couple of years ago, I would have been happy and we would already have had them.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right, I think that's a great idea, especially if we're going to get reimbursed for those. I do have one question about the repair of the squad. Do I want to know what happened to the squad that we had to spend $16,000 on?
That I'm unsure of. You'd have to, I check with Chief Dethridge and let you know next meeting.
All right. Okay. We will see this ordinance again in 2 weeks. Now we will move on to second readings. Ms. Eaton, you may go ahead with the first, second reading whenever you're ready.
Ordinance repealing Oxford Codified Ordinance, Chapter 139, entitled Student Community Relations Commission, Section 13902, Composition and Appointment, and adopting new Oxford Codified Ordinance, Chapter 139, Student Community Relations Commission, Section 139.02, Composition and Appointment.
All right, may I have a motion to adopt?
Move adoption.
Adoption by Mr. Staveley, second.
Seconded.
Second by Ms. Southard. And I'll go back to Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mayor. This is being a second reading there. This is similar to what was discussed last time. Another one of the city commissions that does take quite a few volunteers and some staff to support. So this has been one that operates during the school year primarily. And what it does is help to, just like its title, Student Community Relations Commission, is to help the, essentially the relationship between how the citizens in the community view the students and vice versa. And some of those relationships require associations with some of the groups. So the Greek organizations, some of the on-campus student life organizations, as well as residents of Oxford. And so because of just changes over the years and some of the names of the Miami departments, it made sense to make the terminology a little bit broader so that a department director could designate someone, so it didn't have to be the department director, those kinds of things. So that's really all this is just a broadening out of the terminology. It's an existing commission. So that's all I have to share.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this ordinance before council?
I do not see any hands raised.
All right. Any council discussion? All right.
I just thought it might be useful for, just for a moment to outline again for the public what boards and commissions do, why we need their input. I mean, I think it's great that we are looking at this and adding an international student and updating the composition or the names of the people included. But I just thought maybe it would be useful for citizens to hear what boards and commissions do and why we want their membership, why we want their applications on those boards.
You want all the commissions or just this one?
Oh, just generally what boards and commissions do and why it's such a good thing for citizens to be involved. That's all. I mean, it is a good thing, and they play an advisory role, as we've heard many times, and I just thought that the public might like to hear that again.
All right.
Well, we can do that at a later date, Edna. Obviously, as we all know, that information is available on our website, right at the top on the left-hand bar, boards and commission. It goes into detail about the purpose of each board and commission, lists the members of the boards and commissions, provides their minutes from recent meetings. In fact, I think we archive them, and there's lots of information. And so, if someone is interested, certainly if you're interested in serving on a board or commission, I would recommend that you take a look at that information. There's the wealth of information on the internet, but certainly we could do something else if council wishes.
No, that's really all I had in mind. I appreciate it very much what you just said. I think that's enough information for now. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Prithridge.
Well, I guess this is a good opportunity to thank all of the people who serve on our various boards and commissions. Sometimes it seems like we have a lot of them, and we do have a lot of them. But the fact that we devote energy as council to making sure the composition, that the structure is right, that the composition is right, is I guess just a to build on what Councilor Southern was saying, you know, we at council are often at the end of a decision.
Lost you, David.
Is really super essential. And so thanks to everyone who's working on making sure our boards are right. Thanks to people who are serving on them. And that role is really, really important. So it is a good opportunity to emphasize that.
All right. We have no further discussion. Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge.
Yeah.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. That ordinance is adopted. All right. That brings us to announcements and communications. So this would probably be, no? I'm seeing.
This is our added item, I think, that David.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Before we do announcements and communications, let's have our COVID-19 discussion. So.
Okay, so I'll kick it off, and then I guess what I'd love to do is to get an update from Jessica or someone who's been really a party to the conversations, just for big picture context. Where we are is, as you guys all know, Miami delayed the start of the school year in terms of classes being taught. Will be online until September. But juniors, seniors who live off campus, as well as many sophomores, Miami released sophomores from their housing contracts, and many of them rushed to get apartments in Oxford. So I don't know what number you put on it, but I would venture to say we have 10 to 15,000 students who may be in Oxford this semester, regardless of whether Miami is offering in-person classes, and even if, for example, the campus were to close. So when we talk, and I guess I'm a little bit concerned because, you know, I'm receiving communications as a professor. I'm a parent of a first year. I'm on council, and I guess I'm still unclear as to, for example, how the off-campus population will be handled, so we can ensure or try to keep that population safe. Because I know that if COVID spreads among that population off campus, and some of their behaviors are going to put them in risky categories, you know, it could very well imperil Miami's in-person semester that they're hoping to have in September. And those students are literally pulling into town right now. So what I was hoping to do is have a conversation about what, if anything, can we do between now and 2 weeks from now, when the semester starts, to try to include that. And I have some ideas. I mean, I'm concerned about the non-family social gatherings. I really am unclear what the testing and other strategies are going to be off campus, and if campus is closed, what are kids going to do? So programming. So I have some things I want to come back to, but before I jump into them, I would love to hear from those people who are party to the safe return to campus, and what's the thinking about how Miami's going to handle all of these students, which are its students, but may be in town anyway. So I thank you for insisting this. I felt like
Well, let me start off, if I could, and it's because you got a lot of information to share with you, but council's aware of several of the steps that we've already taken. I mean, obviously, we're all aware of our face mask ordinance that council adopted. We also have a form on the city's website entitled COVID-19 Concerns. And just today, I think we received 7 or 8 concerns. So we have that on there. We met with the bars and restaurant owners last week. I shared that with city council. We had a very productive meeting with them. And we talked about our expectations and concerns with the return of Miami University students. So Jessica facilitated that meeting. Mayor Smith was involved, Police Chief Jones, Fire Chief Deathridge, Assistant to the City Manager, Seth Kroppenbaker, and myself. And we also invited the Butler County Health Commissioner, Jennifer Baylor, to join us with her staff as well. So we had a very, very productive meeting and talked about expectations, shared information. We plan to have a meeting next week with the landlords and to discuss expectations there. So, we've got a lot going on. We expected that this would be on the agenda. I'd like Jessica to share with you some information, especially with the Safe Return, because she's been heavily involved with that, spending a lot of time and meeting with the various Miami University officials. So Jessica, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Doug. So I actually, just before this meeting, was listening in on the off-campus student webinar with Jane Brunel and the provost, Jason Osborne. And they went through several things with the off-campus students. I had actually hoped to see more people on there, but it was about 123 attendees listening in. But they went through that they very much hoped that students would not move back until the in-person classes started in September, but they also acknowledged that that probably wouldn't happen. And they really made a lot of pleas too, that it's on them to keep the community safe. And so I want to also share with you that Chief Jones and I met with Dean Moore this morning and Ann James to talk about consequences on campus for off-campus behavior. And I've invited them to speak to City Council on August 18th. But I can provide you maybe just a brief summary of basically they are saying that like us, they are taking this community safety very seriously, and that a violation of a COVID restriction is going to be considered a health and safety violation in the Student Code of Conduct. And of course, if it's a minor violation, it will result in education and a conversation. If it's a repeated or egregious violation, they said that they will move swiftly to a more serious consequence that could include probation and or suspension. And so that was reported to us. And then we talked a lot about how we will be sharing our information with them. The primary source of information to them will still be a formal police report, but then we will also be sharing the data that we collect in our COVID concern form that we have created, and we'll be sharing that with them as well, so they can kind of see repeat violations. Today they also talked about, I'm not sure how, I spend about 4 hours a week in meetings with Miami University right now, so I could, how deep do you want me to go? I could talk a little bit about their quarantine plans. I could talk about their community advising the students, or I could stop here and answer direct questions.
Maybe can we do these one at a time? I mean, to me, I think the non-family social gatherings is its own thing. Okay. And then I think quarantine and testing is another thing. So Jessica, could you confirm, so I've looked at Miami's pledge that they're asking students, and it says, repeated violations. And so, but what would the violation be? It's not currently against the law to hold a party. It's a governor's recommendation. So what would a party be cited under, by whom, in order to trigger that, repeated? Do we know?
Well, they did state clearly today that mass gatherings need to be 10 or fewer, and the only exceptions are weddings, funerals, and First Amendment rights, which are protests. And then we did talk about how we plan to enforce it, but I'll let Chief Jones, you want to chime in on what we talked about a little bit?
Sure. And as you know, yeah, the governor's orders, those are difficult sometimes to interpret. And so really we most of the parties we respond to, we use other ordinances to enforce it, such as litter, noise, disorderly conduct, nuisance party. We have a section for that. So when we write a citation for something like that and we send it to the university, they'll have that, and they'll also have the information from the officer that this was this was an out of control party that endangered the health and safety of others there. But also I'm still going through the governor's orders. He said he was condensing them into one thing. I haven't seen that, but maybe Jessica saw something, because I saw a recommendation too, like you, Mr. Prithridge, and that had me concerned. So there is an ORC section for a violation of a health department order. It's not something that the courts have sorted out, and we would use that though, and we have used that if necessary. So, but I think most of our parties can be addressed through other offenses that we have always, addressed parties for.
So I guess my thing with this is, and I want to hear other folks, I mean, I think there's a lot of ambiguity in this. There's a governor's order, it's a recommendation, and I think that for this to work at all, it needs to be hyper clear to people. And so I would like to think about whether we might like to take the governor's recommendations and turn them into an ordinance. And I think that, and this is an opportunity to call for that, and see if there's a second. But and my thinking right now on this is just as a straw man is that we have a 10-person limit, but maybe we up the limit outdoors. So you could go up to 25 people outdoors, because I think people are going to do social gatherings. It's naive to think that they won't. And I think that we would need to have a tiered first offense, second offense, with serious penalties that would be communicated. So I think something like that would have a decent chance.
We lost you again, David.
Can
Oh.
affect what we need to have happen here.
Here, let me, we lost part of that, David. You got garbled, but Bill's got his hand up. Let me go with Mr. Snavely.
Or Edna can go. She's been wanting to raise her hand too. So go ahead, Edna.
Well, thank you. I think this is one of the things that citizens are more concerned about than anything else, and justifiably. We have never been in a pandemic before. This is a serious issue. And I have to say that I think we should be very proactive here. And I would definitely like to see an ordinance on an emergency basis that about gatherings, because I think like the face mask issue, it's very clear that we can't rely on either the national government or the state government. They are making recommendations and then they're coming back, and it's very hard to interpret. I think we should have our own, and I really urge us to do that. And I think that, one of the things that doesn't seem to be mentioned here is what the role of the Miami police is. I would think that they should have some sort of role in enforcing this. After all, these are, we're talking about parties that probably will be Miami students. So I would like to some consideration of that. And I would propose that our legal team help us write an ordinance that would carry some weight. So that's where I am.
Well, I agree with Edna. I think that's absolutely right. I think August 18th is late for the university to be talking to us. And when they talk about consequences, I hope it's something like suspension, like Tulane has talked about, so that it is clear. I don't think we should have 3 different steps, because then we'll have 3 different infectious gatherings. I think if it is clear and it's spelled out and it's significant, we won't have the problem. And it's not just students. There will be people in the rest of the community as well. The sophomore rush has already begun, and I've heard reports from landlords that they are being overwhelmed and that everything is pretty much rented up. So the students are here. Now, the state of Ohio, Governor DeWine has decided to encourage the Liquor Commission to close all bars at 10 o'clock. I understand why they might want to do that, but in a college town like ours, that's not such a good deal, because students don't go uptown until 9 or 10 o'clock. And so now they may not go up at all. And then they'll immediately go to large house parties. And that's probably true for non-student residents as well. They can look at a house party as being a better alternative because they can stay later. So I agree with Edna. I think there should be a significant fee for a large gathering in the range of like $500. If it's only a small fee, then they just pass the hat around and probably make a profit on it and then call themselves in to get it again. So I think it should be a significant fee. I think we're in for a significant problem if we don't take significant action. And I commend David for bringing it up. And I second the call for legislation at our next meeting as an emergency. And I appreciate Edna's comments. I think they were spot on.
Okay. I think I saw Mrs. Green's hand first, and then Ms. Ragu, and then Mr. Bracken.
Well, I can wait if city council wants to finish talking first. It's up to you.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Let councilors finish and then I'll chime in with my.
Okay. Ms. Ragu, did you have a comment? Okay. Mr. Bracken?
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I do think we have to think what would happen when we lay down these rules. And I think the idea of, not allowing indoor parties, but maybe allowing outdoor small gatherings, only outdoors potentially, and probably less than 20, I would say, might be a better rule, because I fear they will take it indoors and we won't know about it. And indoors, you have a much, much greater chance of spreading infection. I also worry about the fines being too small. I think they need to be large, but also going back to holding them accountable on campus for those actions, right? Because you can't just pass around a hat and pay that off. You might suffer consequences with Miami, which I think they'll take a little more seriously. But I support everyone's idea on holding people accountable for this, because this is a very, very big deal.
One quick thing. I think you can have the fine be to either the homeowner or the leaseholders. You don't have to worry about everybody else at the party, because if it all falls on the person whose name is on the lease, and we know whose names are on the lease, it becomes an easier thing for the police, and it disincentivizes holding those parties. And if they are going to be outside, they should be socially distant.
Yes. Ms. Smither? And then we'll come back to Ms. Green. You're muted.
Yeah. Jessica, do you want to go first? Then I'll go.
Well, mine was directly related to kind of, I think what Mr. Bracken just said. And one of the challenges that we've realized, and I don't know if I want to, I think this is probably a good thing because I'm looking at it and it does say recommendation versus order. But one of the things that was raised this morning as an obstacle that we're going to need to find a way is we don't really have a clear way to know of all who lives in any particular address. The university asks the students to report. It has software to verify that they're entering a valid address, but they still like just make up an address. And so we don't really know. And then what we're also hearing is that not all, but some landlords aren't willing to share who's on the lease. And so it's just something for us to consider, right? We have the utility bills that has part of the information. We have self-reporting from students with part of the information, but getting a complete picture of who lives in the home is one of our top challenges that we have as we look at something like this. And I'll stop there.
So imagine though that what we do is the penalty is stiff, and if one person in the house is on the hook for it, they're going to say, "Hey, guys, this can't be happening." So I don't think it needs to be complete. You need to find a host, and I still think if Miami's thinking multiple strikes, I think we should do $500 the first time and $1,500 the second time, something like that, and it really is. There's no passing the hat on that, and we're communicating each one of those things so that if you get to 2 strikes, but you may be out of the university and $1,500. I think as long as there's a person on the hook who's the host, then you have the social behavior. Like, how many people do we have here? You guys got to go.
We can find out.
Yeah,
we can find that out.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say is I don't want this to drive the parties into the basement. So what I would suggest is that there be a tiered thing where you can have a bigger party if you keep it all outdoors. I'm not sure, so that's just my thought, that you could have X number of people indoors, but you could have a greater number outdoors. And then and if it's some number that you could count, like, okay, 20 people, you can count the heads, and all right, then that'd be a manageable thing outdoors. And I think if we built that into the culture, it could be okay, like, yeah. So, I mean, I understand that there are issues. I will say, frankly, I can't believe that it's August, whatever, and we're just figuring this out. Because basically Miami is not discouraged 10,000 plus students from being in town. And we don't really have, so I think, yeah, so if we could do this, and we could do this, I believe we need to have an emergency meeting before 2 weeks from now, because I think people need to come into town and just know, no, you can't have a party here. You can have 20 people, and that culture would happen. But if this gets out of the gate, it's going to be hard to go back. So
A few comments, please. So are you looking to do an administrative fine or a criminal fine? There's a big difference. And then secondly, I mean, we heard earlier about Black Lives Matter not sending the police out on every incident or problem that we have. And this is exactly what we're looking at here. I mean, and another comment or question I guess I'd like to make is, I don't think we should deviate from the 10 rule. And of course, it's going to have to apply in my neighborhood and your neighborhood too. It can't just be for the students. But I'd like to see us stick at 10, because if we say, well, the governor says 10, but we have one that's 25, and I think that's confusing. We got to be consistent. And we really, really need Miami's help, because they have the big stick. The money, I don't care if it's $1,000, they can still pass around the hat. And as we all know, we have lodging houses and fraternity houses that they're a family unit, and they can have that many at a party if it's 25 or 10. But, we really need to have Miami's assistance on this, because this is different than underage drinking. We're talking about the health and safety of everyone. And we're talking about our future economy. I mean, if the students come here and, we have 1,000 of them that really don't give a hoot, they're going to spoil it for everybody.
Yep.
And so, believe me, we've had this conversation among staff about what we should do. And, someone once said, one of our council members, that a law is not the answer to everything. And, so we're grappling with this with you as well. And
I agree with the city manager about the outdoor, because if you say you can have 20 people outdoors, they're not going to be socially distant. It's just not going to happen. So I agree with him.
I see Mr. Elby's hand.
Thank you, Mike. I have a slightly different opinion on this particular situation. So after hearing everybody's comments, it feels like we're doing two things that we've been asked not to do in the past, and I just want to bring those up. The first is we're trying to speculatively legislate how the police are supposed to adjudicate things. And I would rather see the police let us know what things look like, and then we can make an informed decision when they provide that report back. The other thing is, Jessica has already informed us that Miami is fully willing to participate in having the students experience real scholastic-based punishments if we relay that information back to them that they are not behaving like good stewards in our city. So it's my opinion that we shouldn't rush to have emergency meetings and have emergency legislation about things we don't even know about yet. And I know that John and his staff are more than competent enough to assess that situation, report back, and then provide us some suggestions on how we can address the situations first. And I would love to hear from Chief.
Here, let me get, I've got Councilor Ragu's hand up. Let me get to her.
I would agree with Doug that I really hesitate to have a mixed messaging. I mean, that's a problem that we've had from the federal, state, and local level, that we should really try to be as consistent as possible. But I can understand why, you're trying to make an incentive for them to be outdoors. But I also think that there's physicists that study aerosols and the passage of it. I mean, these are the people that talked about how COVID was passed on aerosols before we thought masks were not a big deal, or it was being spread on contact surfaces. And we know that, look at the end of last year, there were parties everywhere, and that was during shelter in place. So we're in a situation where businesses are open. I have no reason to think behavior would be any different. And we're talking about an infectious disease. If you have 10 people at a party infecting each other, that's just a logarithmic infectious process. So it's about public health. And I think that I would be really curious to see maybe what Jenny Baylor would have to say, or, feedback from the public health standpoint. Because I think Doug, you're probably in most direct contact with her.
Yeah, myself, Jessica, John, and John Dethridge as well too, JJ and John Dethridge. I mean, we have a lot of communication going on right now, but they don't have a lot of staff, and they got a whole county. That, for example, the face mask, they're leaving it up to us to pass an ordinance and enforce it. So I'm not sure, if you got a chance to read the minutes from our meeting with the liquor establishments, she talked about a 4-step process. If they get complaints, and then the first one was to make a phone call, and I think the second one and the third one was a visit, and then they were going to turn it over to the liquor enforcement agency. So, their involvement wasn't great. So this is I'm glad we're having this conversation so we kind of all understand what we're up against and what our resources are and our abilities here. If we put together an ordinance, I'm not sure I want to ask the police to do it, but I don't have much other staff. If it's an administrative one, I think we'll fare better. If we go to court with a criminal charge of, a gathering over 10, I'm not so sure that the county prosecutor and the judge would support us on this. I mean, there is some different thinking in our country right now, and we're a little slice of different viewpoint than the rest of the county, if you will. So those are things that we must consider. And, then that's why we're really leaning on Miami hard, because they do have the big stick, and we can provide that information to them. They must take this seriously, because they're talking about their own jobs and stuff. I mean, this is serious, and the future of Miami, and the students.
I hope that, because I know we're talking about this 3 strikes, and basically every semester it seemed like all of the infractions that they would do would be erased. Is this something that could at least be kept on in a permanent basis, so that, because I would agree, I said this last time, I'm really hesitant to put another thing on the police to do. And I think that Miami probably does carry the biggest stick in this, and the biggest consequence that people might actually listen to.
There, I see Edna's hand first, then I see Mr. Perry.
Well, I would like to say that the attitude about what the police should and should not do is, goes a very wide range. There are some people who are actually proposing that the police be stationed in front of Kroger's and at Walmart's. I mean, this is, to the extreme of no policing at all. But what is the role of Miami's police? Couldn't they do some administrative fining? Don't they have any kind of power at all? If we say the university needs to take responsibility, what about Miami's police? Why does it have to fall exclusively on our very stretched police force? And in addition to this issue, I want to raise a couple other things about. I'd like to know what standards. I mean, people are very confused. They don't feel that they have the information, And we'd like to know what Miami is doing about testing for COVID and quarantining and contact tracing.
Okay, and we're going to get to those. We're going to get to those. We're going to have Jessica give us an update on testing and quarantine.
Okay.
I got Glenn's hand. Glenn.
I would like to cede my time to Chief Jones.
Yes.
Okay.
I've seen his hand up a few times and I want to give him this time.
Okay. I get hands, but you guys are in different orders on my screen. So that's where I thought we were going. Chief.
Yeah, so I guess what I want to say is to Mr. Prithridge's point, like it's not the last minute that we are dealing with this. I've been dealing with this for a while, right? I mean, we've talked to the judge. Okay, we've talked to attorneys. There's things I don't want to say in a public meeting because I don't want people to skirt the way of how to get around it. We historically have always responded to parties here. We're used to dealing with public disorder. The nuisance party regulations that we have give us a very powerful tool in dispersing parties, right? At the last meeting, we talked about the political will of council and what you guys want. I took that information and then I have to send that down to my staff, right? I just had a meeting with sergeants last night. We went through all these things on a very micro level to talk about what do you do at a 10-person gathering? How do you address that? You inform, educate. What do you do? When are you going to lay the hammer down? When are you going to write tickets? We talked about that number 20, right? So we have those ideas in mind. We have to use existing laws, I believe. I would defer to the attorney, but based on our conversations with the judge, a city ordinance is going to hold up a lot less than the state code, and that's not going to hold up. Okay, there's a First Amendment freedom to assemble. So if you're going to let people protest in the street who are committing disorderly conduct, you can't take someone peacefully out of your yard who's just having a party just for simply being there. Okay, yes, I understand there's a pandemic. I understand all of that, but there's no teeth to that stuff. Let us use the existing laws and we can also educate and inform on those. But I think if you see a raging party with 30 people, we're going to go in, we're going to cite people for disorderly conduct. We're going to cite them for noise. We're going to cite them for litter. We'll arrest them for underage drinking. We'll disperse the party. The nuisance party regulations allow us to give an order to cease and disperse once they have one or more of the following conditions. And I'm pretty confident that there's political will to enforce these strictly. So if I walk up to a party and there is litter on the yard, that is a social gathering which is conducted within the city, and it results in one or more of the following conditions, one of them being litter, I can disperse the party. So we're going to use existing tools. All I can ask is for some trust. I've got 18 years in policing. I've done this. I went to school for it. I've been to multiple command staff trainings. This is a pandemic. It's new territory, but constitutional law does come into play. And so you can certainly pass the ordinance, but I'm not going to have an officer probably. I mean, it's going to be ineffective. That's just my opinion. You're muted, David.
Yeah, if I could, I wanted to start out with an apology. When I say I can't believe we're talking about it last minute, I'm not talking about the city of Oxford. I'm just really disappointed with Miami University and its ambiguities about the situation, particularly the off-campus population. I was waiting for more clarity from the university, explicit clarity to students' messaging, and I'm the parent of a student, and it's just not there. Yeah. And if there's ambiguity, we don't have a chance. So I think it's on us to be hyper clear, and that's where, for example, thinking about an ordinance, like it's against the law. So however that happens, whether it's a nuisance part, we need something that is clear to students. It's enforceable with a penalty that is meaningful to them. Do you know it's going to cost us $500? And 3, it needs to be clear enough to demonstrate legally that a party was held in violation of the governor's orders, so then we have something to report to Miami. Because I think it's got to be crystal clear to Miami, if they're going to use their own legal penalties, if there's any ambiguity there, it won't result in an academic penalty. So whatever it takes for us to be able to communicate to students and to communicate to Miami, I don't have a fixed idea what that is, and I'll defer to people who know the law, but I just know that that's what's got to happen practically.
For the penalty section for a nuisance party, just so council knows, it is a $500 fine for nuisance parties. And in the past, we've always used that for public disorder. Like when Miami sees a litter ticket come from us or a noise ticket, they're like, okay, the $150 ticket. But when they saw a nuisance party, because that's coupled with other tickets, they knew, their Office of Community Standards, it was a flag to them to know, oh, this was a problem for the police. And so we used that under, Dr. Kerm, when he was a dean of students, we used that as our flag. And, we've had that conversation today with the Office of Community Standards and the dean of students about, taking severe action. And yes, like they understand, like, oh, this is a violation where somebody forgot to put their mask on or didn't wear a mask, they were talked to. That's one thing. An endangering health and safety is a much more severe penalty. And that's why Jessica asked them today to come talk to council, because we just feel like they could give more clear messaging to you. So anyway, I think we're on it. I mean, yes, there's going to be problems, and yes, there's going to be people not socially distancing at parties. And I wanted to answer Edna's question about Miami police. We've talked to them, and they're definitely supportive with us. They're law enforcement as well. I mean, so they're going to follow the same rules, but they can take they do have a reporting system to the Office of Community Standards, just like we're going to. So we're going to try to funnel that all back to them too. So I think they're on board. We just got to figure out how to, manage it. Are we going to divide it up geographically or not? So thank you.
All right, I'm seeing Bill's hand and I'm seeing Mr. Bracken's hand.
Yeah, I would like to trust Chief Jones on that. And I think if he uses the nuisance party that's already on the books, I think that's good. I do think that we need to monitor this, because if it's out of control and they can't do anything, then I think Glenn's right. We need to come back then and say, what are we going to do? But I just didn't want us to go, well, we're not going to do anything and then let it get out of control, because all of the small businesses in Oxford are depending on us to make the right decision here. If we all have to close down again, it'll be disastrous for a lot of people.
All right, Mr. Bracken.
Yeah, I think the issue is, and this isn't a knock on our police force, which is plenty capable, but the students are often not responsive. I mean, we're going to wait to see what we already saw, I think, if not worse. At the end of the school year before, our police department went out and broke up many parties, but we saw that they reformed almost immediately after, or came back the next night again and again and again. And that's not something you can really do anything about. In fact, I could certainly see it possible that we do a really strict, really expensive ordinance and it's still ignored. And in fact, I think even under our best efforts, I worry this is going to spread and make things worse, and we're going to have worse outcomes. But I feel we have an obligation to do as much as we can. And that doesn't mean to come down as hard as we possibly can, but to be as effective as we can in whatever we do go forward with, right? If we have a super ordinance, but the kids don't respect it anyway, it's not going to help us. It's only going to hurt people. But if we can kind of manage things, that's why I was like, I think parties are going to go indoors if we just force them that way. And if they're going to have parties, then I'd prefer they be outdoors. If I could stop them altogether, that would be my solution, but I don't think that's a viable option. So if we can make an ordinance discourage 5, 10, 20+% of them into doing the right thing, I'm all for an ordinance. If we decide that it's truly not effective, then let's not do it. But we better do as best we can with what we got, because the consequences are real. I've had to repeat this several times. A lot of people think it's a hoax. People think it's 1%, right? Mortality rate. It's the 5th leading cause of death in the US right now. It's only been here for 5 months. And that was under closed businesses, closed schools, social distancing, and masks. And by the end of the year, on an annual basis, it's going to be the third leading cause of death. If we didn't do anything at all, it would be #1 cause of death by a lot, and probably into the millions of deaths. So this is a big deal. Just because it's new to us and we have often political reasons to think otherwise, this is a big deal and people need to take it seriously. And hopefully it doesn't take somebody you know, somebody you love getting affected before we do.
All right, Mr. Berthert.
Could I just ask for legal clarification between, I mean, we need an ordinance to be able to enforce. So what would be the connection, legal connection between a gubernatorial order that has a recommendation for 10 people to the nuisance party? So like if we're gonna say you cannot host a party of 10 or greater people, does the nuisance party enable us to say this is a party of 15 people, or does it have to rise to those other, you know, does it have to get really big before we can enforce a nuisance party ordinance on it? That's a question for the chief, for Ben.
Well, just from a practical standpoint, the way the nuisance party ordinance is written, you do have to have one of those other disorderly conduct or litter or noise or underage or some sort of violation going on. I guess for the health order, that's something I think legal would need to research. I don't think we're going to answer that tonight. But for the nuisance party, you need something else like that. And I guess I'm thinking, just from based on my experience here, is that typically when you have a gathering, you're going to have one of those other things.
Okay.
Just that we're not so strict in enforcing those things. We're reasonable about it. You know, at 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, if there's 20 people in your yard and you got the music up, that it might be in violation of the noise ordinance, but you know, it's not unreasonable. You know, we try to enforce it with reasonableness. I think what I'm saying is what's different than in the spring than it is now is a more strict approach in doing it, a more effective reporting system to Miami for follow-up, tracking these things more. I mean, in the spring, I would just pull up in my car, see something, get out, talk to them, and try to educate them and tell them, hey, you know, you got too many people here. And then I would be confronted with multiple questions. Well, what if I go inside? Or what if I do this? And what if I do that? And so you try your best to talk to them and answer them. And quite honestly, back then, I didn't know. You know, I'm not an expert in the medical field. You know, I don't know the right thing. I was just trying to use the law, what the law said and what the order said. So I think we'll have a little bit better picture going forward, but I agree with Jason, like we're going to have people who just don't follow it, and we'll write tickets and it could continue, but I hope we're more effective than we are. I think the challenge is us using the law in trying to judge like, well, this is an outdoor party that you all see and that people are going to call on. How, you know, if we go in and we write a ticket, they likely will go inside, and that's going to be difficult to stop, right? I can't just walk in someone's house under the Fourth Amendment. So that may drive parties inside, but you know, when the officer goes and we can educate, I think that'll be helpful. But
so I guess, and that's great. I mean, I guess to me, there's the legal part, which the students don't need to know what ordinance they're being, I mean, what I hope is that there's really hyper clear communication that non-family social gatherings, as per the governor's orders, you know, can result in a $500 fine or whatever. I mean, I'm not sure we need to communicate the nuance of which part of our law we're enforcing on them. Because I think once you wade into that ambiguity, then you've lost the communications battle. So as long as it can be really communicated that there is a firm threshold, there's a big fine, and there's going to be an academic penalty, then I think people will self-regulate because people's careers are on the hook, and I hope it works. So.
Got Councilor Ragu's hand.
Let me know if we're planning on talking about this later, but you know, just thinking about on the issue of education, because that probably would be the most proactive thing. Just reading about how the terminology we're using right now really isn't that effective, as far as most people don't understand what asymptomatic or symptomatic spread means. and they don't necessarily know when they're contagious. I'm just curious if Miami is trying to take a proactive approach of trying to educate, especially if so many, yeah, go ahead. Or what we can do too to be, not use so much medical jargon, maybe to target the audience that maybe isn't not understanding what it means, what they're doing with spread.
Here, I see Jessica's hand up, see if she can.
I can't answer it exactly, Chantel, but I will say that I've been extremely impressed with the Miami committee I've been working on, the Safe Return to Campus, like hard-working, caring people, and they have students involved. They have every department I can imagine involved, and they're all people who are really thinking about exactly what you're talking about, communicating, educating in a clear and concise way. There's been a lot of impatience, like that a lot of us are feeling since we've started meeting, like all summer. And so I think they're trying really hard if you guys remember Jen O'Brien, who was the off-campus coordinator, I will say that Jen's an excellent communicator. And so she's really been working with the student population to educate on all these things we're talking about. And while I'm kind of unmuted, I also will say, I invited Miami to speak on the 18th because it's our next meeting, but they absolutely would probably be willing to speak whenever, right? That was just our next meeting. So I just wanted to, I can't all the way articulate what they're doing, but I will share with you, like in full trust, that they are doing their absolute best. And I think Jen is an exceptional communicator. So.
All right. Mr. Bracken?
Yeah, I think it would be great if we were more clear on the education side, but I think the truth is in almost all things regarding human behavior, but especially when you're younger in your 20s and in college, most people are not motivated by knowledge and education, and impulse control is definitely an issue. And so while I think we should be as good as we can be on the education side and really clear about what it means, what we should do, I'm not sure how effective that will be. I am very interested in hearing about testing and tracing and quarantining, though, if we're ready to move on to that.
Okay, let me see if I can sum up our discussion about an ordinance. I think for the moment, we're willing to trust Chief Jones and the police and the nuisance party ordinance, but I still think maybe Mr. Elliott and legal should maybe work on an outline or a draft of what an ordinance could be if things go absolutely south and we need to pull it back out. If nothing else, it gives us a big reason to get a lot of press over what we're doing for education wise, if we have to really crack down. So does that sound like where we want to go to everybody? Okay. I'm seeing
I
Mr.
would just
Bracken.
add that we need to have a really clear understanding with Miami University that they're going to have significant penalties when Chief Jones gives them the information. And that's what needs to be communicated, because that'll, I think, is what'll make the difference.
Mr. Bracken.
Yeah, I was just going to relay that I wouldn't be opposed to an ordinance right now, even though that doesn't seem to be the consensus. And that whatever ordinance, if we should come up with one or pass one, definitely needs to consider how it's actually going to affect the community, not just, we're not just laying down penalties for the sake of penalties. We have to know how the students are going to respond, because it could do more damage than good if we don't craft one correctly.
Well, and I guess I would just say right now, it's ambiguous how it's against the law to hold a party. There's a gubernatorial recommendation. So if I just ask the question, like, am I allowed to have a party or not? Well, there's a gubernatorial recommendation that connects to a health order. It's not against the law as far as I can see. So, I mean, I think that anything to make it unambiguous. So I don't think it would hurt to have an additional ordinance that made it a law in Oxford. And it could be cited alongside the nuisance ordinance and whatever's going to get the job done. But I just think, like, as enforceable or not, I mean, I think that Miami University, if it does not open to students in mid-September, is going to have a $30 million shortfall. And that's just on campus. So, you know, if we have to put every ounce of leaning into this now, because if it spreads between now and September 15th, there will be no in-person semester. So, you know, I guess I don't want to pull any punches on this. And so I would be willing to venture on an ordinance just to do it. Even if the nuisance party ordinance is the one that'll stand up in court. But I'll do whatever we think is going to work. But I don't want to hesitate to take any action that I could have taken.
Bracken?
Yeah, in a lot of situations, this applies to a lot of laws. I wouldn't even necessarily need to enforce, knowing that there was some effect just from the threat of it potentially being enforced, to letting people know that there is a law, and if need be, we could act on it. That alone, if that was effective, I would be in complete support of that by itself.
So I guess, I mean, not the consensus, we have the nuisance party, but could I guess I'm asking that a call to legal to develop an ordinance, to begin developing an ordinance. And then we can act on it, you know, soon or later. There's no, yeah. So I would call for that, I guess.
Edna.
Although I've been frequently have said that a law is not the solution to every problem, in this case, I think that whatever, as I said, to echo my fellow counselors, to echo Jason and David, it's really true that we have to find ways. We have to do everything we possibly can, and we have to, if that means a law, you know, that we should pass a law. If it, whatever it means, we need to protect our everybody. We need to protect it because more than 150,000 Americans have died. This is a lot of people, and you know, this is a very, maybe an ordinance. Looking at it the other way, maybe an ordinance would be helpful to the police. They could say, you know what, it's against the law. Just as with the masks, it was a recommendation on the part of the governor when we passed a law. That was a good idea. So maybe, you know, that now this is a recommendation on the part of the governor to limit gatherings. You know, we're not talking about gatherings that, we're not talking about all kinds of gatherings. We're talking about certain kinds of gatherings that could be defined in which people are not distant from each other. I mean, I don't know the legal language, but I do think that getting the help of our legal team to help to come up with the right thing, and then we're ready to go if and when it's necessary, that we could do this on an emergency basis, because people are really concerned. Thanks. And I do appreciate all that you're all doing to keep our community safe, but people are just very nervous.
Sure. Okay. All right, clear as mud to staff on what our direction is. I think we want to go ahead and start working on an ordinance.
As long as there's a second, if there's a second to my call for legislation, then that's all I need.
Bill seconded a long time ago, so yeah, okay. All right, let's go back to Mrs. Green to talk about testing and quarantine.
Okay, so in the meeting this evening with off-campus people who were interested in the off-campus topic, Dr. Brunel shared about testing and quarantine. So the testing will be administered for anyone who has symptoms of COVID, and it will also be provided for asymptomatic faculty, staff, and students who have a recent or suspected exposure to COVID. And they will be doing that at the Student Health Service and the Employee Health Clinic. And so they spoke about that today, and they seem pretty confident in their testing ability. And then for quarantine, they have kind of two plans. Isolation is for those with a positive test or a presumptive positive test with a diagnosis from a physician. And then a quarantine will be those who are identified through contact tracing through the Butler County General Health District, and that'll be for 14 days. So quarantine or isolation, I've learned this from the Commissioner Baylor. Isolation is if you're ill, I for isolation. And And then quarantine is for those who have been exposed. And they said that they will encourage students to go home to their residence if they can't, like home with their family if they can, and they can safely quarantine. If they can't, and they live on campus, they absolutely have quarantine space, which is one of the reasons they allowed sophomores to move off campus, was to get more space for spreading out. And because they have to have an individual bathroom in their own room for these quarantine for 14 days. And then students who live off campus are encouraged, if they can't go home, to quarantine in their off-campus house. And if they absolutely feel that they can't do that, they can get a space on campus in one of these quarantine locations. So that is their current plan. That's probably the best I can speak to it. And then if you have more detailed questions, we should really ask Miami to speak to that.
I see Councilor Ragu's hand.
Just in general, so if you do have a possible exposure, are they encouraging testing?
Yeah, yes.
Because there was a little bit of an exposure at a daycare in town, and whenever the health department called the people that were possibly exposed, they did not encourage them to get tested. They said they don't need to get tested. So,
let me clarify. It does say that the testing will be done with the recommendation of the Butler County General Health District through contact tracing. So, but then it goes on to say if you've been exposed or have symptoms.
yeah, which I was really alarmed whenever I heard that, because if you aren't testing, how do you know that that person who is exposed is positive? And so I was just a little bit alarmed that our health department was telling people not to get tested who might have been exposed, but then telling them they should quarantine. So I'm not sure exactly why that would be the case, or if we are low on tests, or like what that was about.
I can't speak to that. I really just don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, I mean, partly I was asking this question because other universities have developed kind of preventative testing protocols. You know, universities are asking for their students to quarantine before they arrive. They're asking them to do tests before they arrive. You know, various iterations on this. I haven't seen that from Miami. So is basically, you know, the off-campus student population, is it basically just like any Oxford resident that Butler County Health District will test? I mean, is there any proactive testing strategy for the students, or is it really they're just part of the general population that Butler County Health and that existing testing capacity will have to deal with?
They did speak a little bit about that, but I don't want to misspeak, but they did say they are not doing like pre-testing before you arrive and that kind of thing, because they felt like if you tested negative, I mean, they did say like basically if you tested negative today, that doesn't mean that you won't catch it then by the time you come back, say on August 17th or August 20th. And that was kind of their reasoning. Like a negative test doesn't mean you stay negative. And then I can't really, that's probably all I can speak to with any sort of intelligence without asking Miami for more clarification.
I see Mr. Snavely's hand.
So I think it was on 60 Minutes or one of the news programs. They showed a university that is doing pooled testing, which is a way to do it in a fairly inexpensive way and cover the entire student body. So I hope they try and think of some creative way, but frankly, the quarantining ahead of time, that ship has already sailed. Students are here. They're already here now. So I don't know that we're going to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, I guess that I'm looking at my Miami communications, and it's basically, it points back to the city of Oxford, Butler County, and the CDC. So I guess my basic question is what responsibility, I mean, it comes down to Miami there are going to be 10 to 15,000 Miami students in town, whether or not their classes or whether the campus is open. So it's conceivable the campus could be closed and we still have that number of students in town. I guess to me, it's what role does Miami proactively take So it sounds like you're saying testing is available at the student health services, and hypothetically, quarantining is available on campus for an off-campus student if it needs it?
Yes.
Okay. So other than that, it really, again, the students are basically general population as far as Oxford's concerned in terms of they're the city and Butler County's responsibility.
I would count them as residents of our community.
Okay. Yeah.
The more buy-in we get from the university and from the students, the better. And so I was impressed by a program that OSU is doing, and I sent that around to everybody today, in which they are using graduate students at the university to help, for instance, with contact tracing. So because one of the problems that I was hearing on the news with contact tracing, for example, is that people won't answer the questions because they feel, it's an invasion. If you can use their peers to help with that, that can be beneficial. And so I'd love to see, would love to know what Miami is doing in that regard to engage students, because that's part of education. And that, the more they can use the resources that the university already has to keep people safe, it keeps us all safe too. So I would want to know that if we can find that out, it might be useful information.
So one of the things I was one of the things I'm contemplating is would we ask for a resolution that's kind of, we've called on other people to do stuff in the past. Can we kind of call on Miami University in collaboration with us and Butler County Health District to take a proactive strategy to, testing, contact tracing? Maybe it's just a symbolic gesture, but right now I'm looking at the situation and I feel like this off-campus student population is basically, I feel it's a big responsibility for the city of Oxford and Butler County to have to take. I really hope Miami takes a proactive approach with a student population that is theirs. So I don't know whether resolution and what that would say or whether it's even needed, but that's just one thought of the way we could express our hopes in regard to testing, quarantining, and contact tracing for the off-campus population specifically.
Councilor Ragu.
I guess I kind of liken this conversation to whenever our president was trying to stop immigration, whenever the virus is already in our town. It's already here. So we're just talking about ways we can try to mitigate the spread. So I think that, obviously the face mask is a no-brainer. Trying to break up the contact we have in between people, trying to make sure they understand how they're spreading the virus. So I'm not against anything people are saying, but it's already here. And as much as all of us travel outside of Oxford and come back in, we're also bringing it with us. So I'm just gonna re-ask my question. I hope next time y'all talk to Butler County Health Department, I'm just really curious about, I want to know that when someone is exposed to COVID, that they are recommending testing and they're not discouraging it, because they are our front line to make sure that we are trying to contact trace and test and quarantine. So I just want to make sure that hopefully that story I heard is just a one-off and is not happening to many community members and students and whatever role or whatever part of life they're in, that our health department is actually testing people.
Mr. Bracken.
Yeah, there were two other areas I was hoping we could visit at some point, maybe now if there's an opening. But I'd like to know if we still feel comfortable with McCullough Hyde's ability, should spread get out of hand and people be forced to the hospital, and also revisit the idea of promoting and or requiring, but probably promoting more outdoor bar use, restaurant use rather than indoor. Have we thought of any ways that we could potentially make that more accessible? Thanks.
Let me comment on your first question about McCullough Memorial Hospital. Every week we have a leadership meeting, and Mike Everett with McCullough Memorial Hospital updates us on the hospital situation. They have ample capacity right now, and of course they can draw on the other Tri-Health hospitals. So now, you know, that can change, but you know, we get updated weekly on that. And he did share with us their testing capabilities and how they're obtaining equipment so they can have a really fast turnaround. I think if I remember correctly, right now it's about a day, but they're talking about less than a day if they get this equipment. So, you know, I think we're in good hands as far as McCullough Memorial Hospital. But of course, we all know that if numbers all of a sudden drastically increase, then it puts a burden on our healthcare providers. I forget what your second question was though, Jason, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I can repeat that, but I want to thank you for that because that's also something I want to bring up. The amount of time it takes to get results back is huge. Getting it back in a day or less is fantastic because I guarantee many people before they get a positive confirmation that they are sick will go about life as normal, and that will be real trouble. But my other question was, have we thought any more about promoting and or requiring our restaurants and bars to go outdoors whenever possible? Because again, spread indoors is far greater than outdoors.
Well, as we all know, most of them are utilizing the outdoor seating on the sidewalks. And as we all know, the Red Brick Friday part of that effort was to provide them more space. So, you know, we'll continue looking at different options for them there. And you know, their hours have been shortened to 10. So, you know, and I'm not sure how much eating goes on after 10 anyway. But, you know, we'll continue to look at that, and maybe we consider, you know, closing some alleys or something like that.
Yeah, I would actually definitely like us to consider, you know, I agreed with Dora only being during the summers before, but it might actually be an effective strategy now. If it increases socializing over what would have already happened outdoors, that's obviously bad. It's not helping, right? But if it's increasing only the outdoor activities and otherwise the same level of socializing, that's a huge benefit. And if it helps our businesses at the same time, that would be welcomed as well. So something to consider, I think.
I just want us to be aware that liquor laws are pretty strict on, and some of our current bars have outdoor spaces, and so they have a competitive advantage here, and others do not have that, and their liquor license would not allow them to go out onto the sidewalks. Now, Dora might be an option. I have issues with Dora that I'll bring up later.
Mr. Brithrick.
So I guess I want to put this in a big picture context, which is, again, what we have is potentially 10 to 15,000 students who are here, but minus any of the regular programming that keeps them occupied. You know, likely there will be no sporting events. Likely there will be no movies on campus. There will not be talks. And so what are 10 to 15,000 undergraduates going to do with their time after spending all week studying online? If there's no other option, then you're to house parties. So to me, I think that like the logical thing has been to cancel a lot of stuff, but I think we need to proactively offer what I'm calling COVID safe programming. And again, I get Jessica, maybe this is a question for you. I know we've been working hard on this kind of stuff as Enjoy Oxford. Do we have a sense that Miami is going to try to do anything to offer program, you know, movie theaters in a football stadium, something to engage a student population so that it's not just all nuisance house parties? And Jessica, do you have a sense that they're thinking about that stuff?
I have not heard anything about programming other than like remote programming is okay, or small groups of 10 are okay. But I think that would be a question that I could ask Scott Walter or his team from Student Affairs. I could find out an answer for you.
I guess just my thought is that I mean, I understand the desire. We'll limit to 10 people or whatever, but I think there'll be energies that students will want to socialize. And if we can have events that are organized like Red Brick Fridays, I think it will make it livable in town. So, I would love to see us invest in things that outdoor programming, movies, closed streets, and I would hope Miami, who has a lot of programming capacity, could help with this. It may be that they just don't want to do it because it's off campus, and they may not want to use campus facilities because of the liability. But again, I guess I'm wondering how we move ahead with something like the Jason's saying, like, do we have plans for street closures, if not for bars, then for just hanging out uptown? I just think we have to have some alternatives, because otherwise we're just going to be clamping down on a party situation all day, every day. So.
Yeah, I saw Councilor Ragu's hand first. You still want to say something, Chantel? No? Okay. Councilor Southard?
And I really favor this concept of COVID safe programming, not only for college, university students, but also for high school students. They're all going to be at loose ends too. So, not everything has to be around alcohol. In fact, everything shouldn't be around alcohol. So if we could encourage, movies, as you said, and plays and concerts and all kinds of performances that are uptown, which we already have had so many, but that would be safe, and people would keep at a distance, and it would be wear masks, but that would also encourage people to enjoy Oxford and be part of the community. And it would be great if it were at Miami on a quad, but otherwise it could also be in our Uptown Park. Or I just would hope that Miami is thinking about this. I'd love to see some kind of collaboration with Miami and the school district, and with the Coalition for a Healthy Community, and with the city, for all kinds of special programming and events that would make this a livable place. So I'm all for this COVID safe programming. I think it would be a great project. But not that I want to give anybody any more work. They're already busy enough. But it is something that could keep people engaged and keep people safe if it were possible.
Mr. Bracken?
Yeah, I just want to be careful. I agree with you guys in principle, but it's a bit of a misnomer. There will be no COVID safe activities. Everything's probabilistic, right? And if we hold events, there's a very good chance that there will be spread throughout those events, period. The question is that better than what would have happened otherwise, right? Does it improve safety? Like, if I could just stop all parties and socializing, I would do that, but that's obviously not an option. So the next thing is, what can we do? Well, we can discourage some from going out, period. And there's a portion of the population, a large portion, that is going to go out and socialize anyway, and they're going to go out and drink anyway. And no matter how much we hit them, they might keep doing it. But if we can give them options that are at least safer than what they would be doing otherwise, I believe that is our obligation to grant that to them.
And I could be, I could be mistaken, but one can take a risk-averse, liability-focused approach to this, right? Which is no gathering that you host, any gathering you host can expose you to liability, so don't do it. I'm with Jason. I think we have to find the best way to get through this, even if and it's about managing risks. And maybe as the city, we have more flexibility to do that. Maybe that's like that qualified immunity stuff, that like maybe we can host events that we're not exposed to liability in the same way. Again, Miami's got a lot of capacity. It's their students. I hope they would be involved in programming and support it, because they have a lot of capacity that's probably underutilized right now. So I don't know, Jessica, we're bouncing a lot of ideas, and you guys have been really busy, but what might, what do you think could be done here that we're not doing?
I would love if you let me process this and then I can maybe write you some ideas and or concerns tomorrow after I have just a little bit of time to like turn some wheels. Would that be okay? Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. Really good discussion, everybody.
I'd like to make one more suggestion. That is that, this COVID thing is with us and it's going to be here for a while. And now I think it would be great if we had a COVID update, very short, just like, I had this meeting with so-and-so, or this and this is what's happening. Just a really short update at every council meeting. This is not to add more work. This is just to say, maybe our city manager could say, I had this discussion this week with so on, and that's enough. Just to let the public know that we are really concerned about it, that we're really on top of it. In some ways, that's as much a public relations thing as anything else, because you are working hard, but the public doesn't seem to know. And I just think it would be useful if at every meeting, maybe right after public comments, that were, just a very short minute or two statement about what's happening and what's going on, so that the public could be informed, would be, I think, very useful.
Do that, and we
Allay a lot of fears.
can do that.
Do that?
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, if everybody's ready, why don't we move on to announcements and communications? And I'll start with Mr. Elliott tonight.
Okay, I'll be real quick. I just want to put another plug in for our gift cards. Help our small businesses here. We've talked a lot about them. We've got a lot of gift cards to sell. I think we're up to probably $14,000, but we've got another probably 80,000 to go. They make great gifts. If you have certain businesses that you go to, please come in and buy some gift cards. As we all know, the money that comes back in will enable us to help our businesses in the next round or next program. That's our intent with that. What else can I share with you real quickly? I do want to draw our attention to the census. The Census Bureau released information today that they're going to end data collection on September 30th, a month earlier than they had planned. And of course, being a college town, our response rate is not real great. As of August the 1st, our rate is 51.3%. Now this compares to a US response rate of 63% and an Ohio rate of 67.3%. So if you know of any friends, neighbors, students that haven't filled out a census form, and they can do it online or by mail or phone, have them filled out. It's very, very important. And that's all I have this evening. Thank you.
All right. I don't know, do we still have Mr. Newland with us?
I don't think so.
Okay, then I'm going to go to.
No, his name did show up.
All right, I'm going to go to Chief Jones.
Mr. Mayor, did you call on me? You cut out.
You've had any comments tonight?
Well, yeah, I do. And I'll try to be brief, but it's hard for me to be brief. But I just want to say, if the folks from Black Lives Matter, Mr. Humphreys, and some of the other speakers are still on, I just wanted an opportunity to respond to them. I think the items they brought up are worthy of further discussion at PCRC, and I'll go into, we'll have those more in-depth conversations there. But I will say their proposals, the first two, I think are already things that we're working on, and they're works in progress, and that are achievable. The third one is a relatively new concept to me, so we've only kind of begun to discuss that and look at it. But overall, I think their statement was supportive of values that I've shared in the past, and and so there were a couple places where I think they misspoke on what I said, or maybe I wasn't clear in my communication. But overall, I think, I want to work with them I'm just not familiar with that group. It's a new group. It's an activist group. You know, I've worked with a lot of other groups in the past, you know, NAACP being one. So I would love to engage with them more. And I've asked that of one person involved. So I think I already got on my soapbox earlier when I talked about, you know, my experience in policing, my education. I take these classes, you know, I got a master's degree. I went to the CLE program, the Certified Law Enforcement Executive, where we took entire classes on police accountability and ethics. And I've got books over here that I read about that. So I just would like to be a part of that conversation, because while these are fine ideas, I kind of have some other things I think we should think about. And, you know, one of them, I guess I'll say that I'll stand on our police department's record. I think we're the most progressive police department in Butler County. So it's kind of a little, you kind of feel a little attacked when you're trying to do all these things. And I would venture to say that many of the people who supported this, I bet you some of them live in Oxford Township. And do they realize that Oxford Township has a police department that polices part of the city, you know, that they also have jurisdiction in the city? Also, the sheriff's office. Why are we not talking about that? They have an over $40 million budget, and they share jurisdiction. So not throwing things, you know, off to another department, but I would like to be consulted with what I think are some improvements here, and things like our capital improvement budget, where I want to talk about a policy management system, a professional standards unit. You know, those are different ideas I'll talk to PCRC about, but you know, the third program, the CAHOOTS program, I think that's going to be more of the council level to talk about, because that's going to involve your budget and how you create this other system, if that's what's needed. I guess I would also kind of say the same thing. Like, there are county agencies that are funded by my tax dollars that I pay, and they should be the ones kind of up here addressing that. So we need to have that conversation. How do we engage them more? My proposal for a police social worker was not a hybrid police officer. It was an actual licensed social worker is what I was suggesting. That was not an armed police officer that could respond, because as you know, we respond to many situations that it would be nice to have some follow-up on by a social worker, or they could be the first responder to that incident. So anyway, very interested in a lot of this stuff, but it's all going to involve human capital. So the first two proposals, not as much, although collecting data is not as simple as everybody's making it sound. And we've had those conversations at PCRC. So I just want to let you know, like, these are things that we've been working on. And, you know, I feel like the national agenda has got us caught up into this sweeping motion, but it's something we've already been working on and we already talk about. So that's all I want to say, is I want to be active with that. I also want to remind council that a year ago today, a killer unleashed hell in Dayton, Ohio, killing 9 people. So he was fatally shot within 32 seconds by police officers that carried guns. Those police officers were there and able to respond so quickly because they were embedded in the community. You know, we're not firemen. We don't wait at the station for a call. We have to be out there engaging with the community, carrying a weapon, so that we can respond to potentially violent situations. So, you know, when you say you don't need a gun to unlock a car, that's true, but do you not want us to provide that service? There's reasons police do that. So just, I want to keep that in mind, that I also don't think that I understand the history of policing and understand systemic racism in it. But, you know, to be a police officer, when you hear that and you don't envision yourself that way, that's painful, right? And so our officers do a very good job. And, you know, I understand people are talking about systemic problems and systems, but that's difficult to swallow, that, you know, when you reflect upon yourself, that you know that you don't engage in that behavior. So anyway, I've rambled on for a while, but I just wanted to get that out and say we're going to keep working on it.
All right. Thanks, Chief. Mr. Perry, anything you'd like to add?
One thing I wanted to add, when there's discussion about the distancing for house parties, is there are property owners who do wish to contribute to that by proactively providing space on their own property. So we have had some inquiries, a couple, not many, from landlords who do want to create some outdoor patio space because their tenants don't want to go to house parties. So while we've been talking about enforcement, I think even though it's maybe a small token, it is something that there's been enough time passed in spring that people are realizing that their consumers, their clients, their tenants, however you want to call it, do desire to keep themselves safe. So maybe it's not a large percentage, but it is some good news.
All right. Thank you.
That's all I have. Thanks.
All right. Is there anything Mr. Waddell would like to add tonight?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So thanks. Yeah, there's a couple things I'll mention since you asked. I first want to thank Kroger. I was given a surprise this evening when a picture was sent to me back in the health and wellness section of Kroger. Oxford Parks and Recreation is listed in pretty large letters up on the wall as part of some remodeling that Kroger's been doing along with Oxford Community Park. And there's some other mentions of wellness related places here in town. So that was a nice surprise to get some recognition inside of Kroger. And then secondly, Jessica, I'm assuming you're still listening, but if you want to brainstorm ideas and maybe even pull together our resources in terms of Enjoy Oxford on how to engage students, I'm open to that conversation and things that we can do. I mean, we're still engaged in the community and activities and sports leagues that are permitted. So if there's something we can do, we don't normally seek to serve the student population because the university does that so well. But if they're not doing that and there's something we can do on an outdoor basis, we're open to that conversation. So touch base with me and we'll see what we can do.
All right. Thank you very much. Chief Dethridge, is there anything out there you'd like to add tonight? Maybe he is gone. Okay, I'll ask.
No, sir, I'm good.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Jessica, is there anything you'd like to chime in with tonight?
I have a few non-COVID things. One, I do want to say thank you to the Talawanda School Board for an extremely difficult decision. I watched that meeting and it was painful, but you could tell how much everybody cared. And so thank you to your service to our community. I also want to say yay to Seth Kropenbaker, who has started in our office, and we are excited to have him here. So you can stop by and say hello to him. And then I just want to remind everybody that we are currently planning, subject to change, I'll be calling Casey, to end our Red Brick Friday this coming Friday. And then also we'll be we're planning to end our Dora this coming Sunday. So that's our current plans. And then just that things are continuing to move along. I've been invited to work on the Climate Action Committee for Miami. And then I think Sam, Mike, and I are going to try to work on Amtrak later this week as well. So other things are also happening.
All right. Miss Eaton, is there anything you'd like to add tonight?
No, nothing tonight. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Mazur, anything you'd like to chime in with? I'm not sure he can hear me. Okay. Let's go around to council. I'll start with Councilor Ragu.
Yeah, I think that, what Chief Jones was talking about is really encouraging as far as wanting to be a part of the conversations. And I always think that, I think it's important to know that it's not a personal attack, and that we are talking about systemic things. And I can understand that if people don't personally recognize that where they might play a role within that system. And I can understand that could be uncomfortable, but I think I appreciate the willingness to want to open up the conversation. And, and I think that's why you are getting so much feedback, is because you are being open to this. And I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone else who spent a lot of time building a consensus and drafting a letter, and making sure that as many people had their part to say in that letter. There was a lot that went into that. So I appreciate your good works. And there's a meeting coming up. The Police Oversight Committee, PCRRC, is meeting Thursday, August 20th at 7 virtually. So whoever is listening out there, just know, put it on your calendar on the 20th at 7. And then I think that I kept waiting for this to come up as far as with our COVID conversation. I wasn't sure if it was only geared towards Miami, but we know evictions are going to go up, and I'm just curious. And whenever we pass that resolution asking the local court to put a hold on evictions, there were 4 different families at that time. Do we know how many are on the docket now?
Yeah, I want to say there's probably 3 and in Oxford that are Oxford residents.
Are these the same ones from before, or are they different ones?
I'm not sure. I don't have that in front of me right now.
Okay, because I know, and to echo what Jessica said, that the school board made a really courageous thing for the benefit of students and their families and the rest of the community to try to limit spread, and know that was really tough for them. And I hope that we can be as courageous in making tough decisions. So I just think that it's going to put a lot of strain on families whenever their kids are not going back to school, and what are they going to do whenever they have to work? And, you know, some people don't even have paid sick days. So what can we do about that from a policy level? So I really look forward to our COVID response, looking at the bigger inequities in our local community that are, that go far beyond the police.
All right. Councillor Ellerby.
I'm going to say nothing tonight, thanks.
All right, thank you. Vice Mayor Snavely.
I have a few things. First, I want to thank Oxford's Fire Department. I think they are just fabulous people, and they show up when they're needed. We had an ADT system that by itself and without our direction sent a call at 2:30 in the morning to the fire department. And they showed up, bless their hearts. And I just want to thank them for doing that and for being understanding when we were bewildered why there was a call. So all of them were out there, showed up on time. They're very professional, and I appreciate them 100%. So thanks to the fire department. Secondly, in regards to our police department, a lot of people have been saying things about them that, frankly, I didn't appreciate. And I think if people start talking about defunding them, they may be talking about something else rather than the funding for the police department. But I hope, and I've heard other counselors say the same thing, that we judge our police department by what they do. And we have a fabulous police department with great leadership, and we need to support them. And I'm behind them 100%, and I just want to throw that out there. I happened to watch the BZA meeting, the last one that they held. I encourage counselors to watch that. It would be an understatement to say I was dismayed. Despite all of the members agreeing that it was a significant change, and despite not showing any kind of hardship, the Board of Zoning Appeals agreed to allow one of our local establishments to build a second-story party deck, which I can't see anything good coming out of. And one of their arguments had to do with COVID, but they also told them that they weren't even going to be starting to build anything and for about a year from now. So I just think we need to maybe have a work session with the BZA for them and us to understand what their role is and what the criteria are and how they're supposed to interpret it. So that's my opinion. I would So apparently the Dora cups have come in. The problem in requiring bars to only use the Dora cups is that a lot of them already bought cups and put the stickers on them. And that's an expense that they engaged in. And now they're being asked to only use the ones that have been purchased, that they have to purchase for, I think it's 12 cents a piece. And they don't know how many they're going to need. They don't know how long this thing is going to last. And they have inventory that they can't use. So I would like to request that bar owners who wish to could continue to use the cups that they've already bought that already have the stickers on them. See, I think that's probably it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Snavely. Councilor Bracken.
Thank you. I would echo Chantel's comments, full through and through, fantastic, and especially around the Black Lives Matter letter. I urge you, Chief Jones, to not view it as an adversarial relationship, to not feel personally attacked, because these are systemic issues. And from what I understand, they understand that you are putting a good faith effort into making our police force as transparent and progressive as possible. And I don't mean that in a political way, but looking forward and leading the way, right? That education that you're getting, all that training, like you're the person to put in place these policies that aren't protecting our city from our own police force right now. Things are going very, very well, but to make sure that we're setting an example for other cities, and going forward after your term here, we have put in place a system that, you know, tries to alleviate those systemic issues that exist. And so I really appreciate you having open ears and good conversation on this, and really, you know, making good faith effort to consider this. If anybody's willing and able to lead the way here, I think you could be that person. You know, far more than many of the other police forces across our country. Thank you for that. And thanks to just all city staff and departments. The amount of work everyone is doing is crazy right now because of all the conditions we're in, but I really appreciate it. And I believe our citizens appreciate it. So thank you.
All right. I would like to go to Councilor Southard.
I want to echo the thanks to the city staff for all their excellent work. And these are very tough times. And the COVID issue is the biggest thing facing us now. And it has all kinds of ramifications, not the least of which was something we didn't even talk about, which is, of course, the city budget. And today, our finance director keeps us up to date by sending us an update regularly. And I really appreciated that, receiving that, so that we're informed about what's happening. And let's hope that we can get through this well. It certainly won't be the fault of our excellent leadership in this community that is failing. You know, it's so we're very fortunate to have such a good city staff, such a good leader in our city manager, and in all the other department heads. So I want to thank you all for that. I also want to thank Councilor Prithurch for bringing up the COVID issue, which is on everybody's mind, and everybody's talking about it. I mean, if counselors get stopped everywhere in town, whether we're going to Kroger's or whatever, and that is what people are talking about. And so I really appreciated this conversation and the sharing of ideas, and I hope that we can continue to do so. We'll get through this because we're a good community and because people are really caring about each other, and that's really great. So check in on people, give them a call. People are still isolating, and the elderly and the infirm, they need your phone calls, they need emails, they need you to check in on them. So just keep an eye on your neighbors, and we're a good community and we'll get through. So thank you, everybody.
All right. Councilor Prithurch.
So yeah, it's late and I've talked enough tonight. I do really want to thank my fellow councilors and staff particularly for amending the agenda. I think this COVID thing is super challenging, and staff is already really stretched. And in part, we're sending conflicting messages, particularly, for example, to the police chief about we want more, what kind of policing we want. I guess if there was ever a time for us to lean into something, it's this. My growing knowledge of the city budget for being on council, if Miami doesn't have operations, it impacts the income tax and impacts the purchases of water and sewer. I don't want to call this existential, but anything we can do to help have a successful semester or to mitigate it just, so I want to thank people for stretching, because I think if there was ever a time to do it, now's the time. And it's literally like in the next few weeks that we can set the model and have a decent chance of success. So if even things are stretching us legally, we got to do it. So I really, really appreciate that. And again, it can be conflicting messages. We're asking the chief to do a lot. And I would echo Councilor Snavely. I can't believe how grateful I am to have the kind of police department we have in the city of Oxford and the leadership that it has. So I too, I feel defensive for the city of Oxford Police Department, because it's hard not to feel defensive. But if there was ever a police chief and leadership that's able to listen and engage, we have that chief and we have that department. So that's really, really fortunate. So anyway, and the last thing I'll say is, in addition to surviving this COVID thing, the city is continuing to do good work. The Oxford Area Trail is really getting close, people, and just among many other forward-thinking projects that we're working on. So we're going to be able to get through this and have great long-term stuff to show for it. But that only comes through hard work. So thanks to everyone.
All right. I'm going to keep it short as well. Thanks to everyone for wearing their masks. I would like our student population to make good choices, especially those new second years who are going to be in their first time off-campus apartments. Please make good choices. Something I've been a little lax in, don't forget to wash your hands. And of course, maintain distance. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Snavely, second. Second by Mrs. Southard. Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll so we can adjourn?
Mr. Bracken.
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby.
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge.
Yes.
Ms. Ragu.
Yes.
Mr. Snavely.
Yes.
Ms. Southard.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right. Thanks, everybody. Had a great meeting. Hang in there.